And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello there, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook for this upcoming weekend. It is Friday, April 5th, 2024, and we start out with the sea ice. And as of note, we have a pretty strong low currently working its way across the lower Bering Sea, and winds, at least in this region, will be more offshore. But eventually, once the low passes, we're going to see winds turn northeasterly, and there may be advancement of the ice southward later this weekend into early next week, as a quick hitting shot of Arctic air will drop down from the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait along the west side of the state and then pull across the Alaska Peninsula by Monday. So looking at the weather setup, late tonight and early Saturday morning, we have a 970 low located just north of the central Aleutians. The central Aleutians, including Adak and Atka, are under a high wind warning late this Friday night after midnight. Through 10 a.m. Saturday morning, southwest winds could gust as high as 75 to near 80 miles per hour in some areas. And this triple point along the front, a secondary low will develop southwest of Kodiak Island come Saturday afternoon. And this feature will continue up into the western half of the Gulf and just kind of sit and spin in that area Sunday on into early next week. So the primary low, though, is still back there. That will cross the eastern Aleutians late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. And then by the time we get into Sunday afternoon, the secondary low sitting up here in the central western Gulf, with the main low pushing into the North Pacific south of the Alaska Peninsula. And then here comes that shot of Arctic air. It's late season, not going to last long, quick hitting. Coming down out of the Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait, this little cold front will work its way quickly southward along the southwest coast and Alaska Peninsula. It'll just get absorbed into this low by the time we get into Monday. But as this front works its way, there is the first front here earlier. It's pushing in across the Panhandle, bringing some showers, and that showery trend will continue throughout the weekend along areas of the Gulf Coast, especially in through the Panhandle. So winds Saturday will be northwest 10 knots around Ketchikan, 5-foot waves, but southeast 15 to 20 knots with waves 3 to 4 feet there, Stevens Passage up to Lynn Canal. In the outer portion of the nearshore waters, we're looking at south or west winds south of Gustavus around 15 knots with swells 11, 12 feet, and then more easterly winds outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling as high as 20 knots. And then those winds pick up Sunday with the approach of that next front. Southeast winds 15 knots up there within Lynn Canal, 3-foot waves, but as high as 30 knots, and Dixon Entrance could be as high as 8 to 9-foot waves. And then look for south-southeast winds 30 knots south of Gustavus, 13, 14-foot swells, and then easterly winds 30 knots there outside of Yakutat Bay and Cape Suckling. Saturday, winds within Prince William Sound will be 15 knots, 2-foot waves. Variable winds 10 knots upper Cook Inlet. Even variable to westerly winds there at the entrance of Cook Inlet at 15 knots with just 3-foot swells. And then Sunday, those winds are picking up as that low tries to establish itself kind of the central western portion of the Gulf. We expect northeast winds 25 knots off the Kenai with 6-7-foot swells. North winds to 15 knots within the wider expanse there of Prince William Sound. And at least north-northeast winds 15 to 20 knots along the length of Cook Inlet with waves as much as 6-7 feet around the entrance of Cook Inlet. For Saturday, with the front approaching from the southwest, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots around Kodiak Island. As you get out toward the end of the peninsula, we expect southwest winds 25 to 30 knots, as high as 11-foot swells there south of False Pass. And then on Sunday, winds will continue northeast around 20 knots around the areas of Bristol Bay and up around Kodiak Island, and then turning more northwesterly around 25 knots there, especially north of Cold Bay, and start to incorporate some of that colder Arctic air that will be dropping down along the west coast Sunday night into Monday. Still the effects of the strong low. By Saturday afternoon, that low will be located north of Nikolsky. Could see storm force winds to 55 knots with gusts as high as 70 knots around Atka and Ada as we go through at least the morning hours, but things should begin to improve by Saturday afternoon. And then as we go into Sunday, those winds really come down. We expect to see northwest winds right around 30 knots across the eastern and central Aleutians, with swells of 11, 12 feet on the North Pacific or on the Bering side, and 12 to 14 feet on the North Pacific side. For areas of the southwest coast, winds will be easterly 25 knots out of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, but northeasterly 15 to 20 knots, Norton Sound down along the lower portion of the Yukon Delta, as high as 35 knots out of the northeast there, though, at St. Matthew. And by Sunday, winds turn more northerly, around 20 knots, and I would expect 20-25 knots Sunday night into Monday. That's going to draw down that quick hitting shot of Arctic air riding down along the west side of the state. So we do expect later in the weekend, Sunday into early next week, there could be some advancement southward of the ice edge here, at least in that time frame. And then looking at the Bering Strait, winds will generally be northeast along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and north side of St. Lawrence Island, 25 knots, ice there in place. North winds 15-20 knots through the lower Chukchi Sea. And then kind of a mixed bag of winds along the Arctic coast, anywhere from 5 to 15 knots. And then for Sunday, in the wake of that cold front, as it pushes southward through the Bering Strait, we expect northerly winds around 25 knots there, lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait. And again, that cold air will be advancing southward Sunday night and into Monday down along the southwest coast and the Alaska Peninsula as well. And even along the Arctic coast then by Sunday afternoon, we expect west to northwest winds running right around 15 knots. So have a good weekend, everybody.